This is your Friday content rundown to wind down the work week. And we have Patrick and Casey with us as usual. And we're just going to jump right into it. Guys, you did a really good webinar this week, and I want to talk about it a little bit and recap and get your thoughts because I haven't had a chance to since it ended.
That is actually true. We haven't had any discussion about it until about 3 minutes ago as we were getting onto this. But I agree. I think it went pretty well. Casey, you did all the demoing, so
yeah, it was super fun. And then it was really fun because there was a number of things in that demo that I hadn't done before, like literally until that morning. And I was like, this would be really cool to show and put it together. And then it was also really cool. Like we've done a couple of AI, webinars and things like that in the past. And the level of questions, like the technical level of the questions, was really surprised me. Like the level of expertise that people have seems to be increasing quite rapidly in this. So that was really cool to see. And just the number of questions we got, that might be at least the most number of questions I've ever gotten on a webinar that I've done. So that was really cool engagement to have. We kind of got crunched for time at the end there. We had so many questions. So I think we'll probably try to answer some of those in a different format.
Yeah, the engagement was cool. And I agree with you that it's neat to see how quickly the industry has come along with this. And it's funny because I will talk to people who are in other industries, like other people who lead companies, those kinds of things. And you'll talk to them about AI. And I've kind of gotten to this place where I have this assumption that people have some of these concepts because I spend most of my time talking to like customers or people who are in the content industry. And like they just do kind of have a level of knowledge about this at this point in time. And then you go like one step out, still in software, still in technology, you talk to people and you're like, whoa, you actually have no idea what I'm saying right now, do you?
But
So it's cool.
Number of people that still haven't used a generative AI, like nationally, globally, is just mind-boggling to me. Like it's over 50%. And that's, we use it every single day. We've been building one. So different perspective.
Yeah, it's wild to think like just over a year ago, like approaching 2 years maybe soon, that no one was thinking about using generative AI in their day-to-day. I mean, like, or they weren't, like it just wasn't as commonplace. Like now it's just as common as having a social media account. It's wild.
I mean, it's one URL away. Like, how could you not have at least just tried it?
Or how many people have replaced like their Google searches with a Chat GPT question, like that's a big one.
Interestingly enough, I still mostly go to Google first, and if I can't get what I want like quickly on Google, then I'll go there. But I haven't flipped those yet, and it's because I don't trust it. Like I still just don't trust it enough that if anything it tells me, if it needs to be factual, I go and Google it anyways. So it feels almost like a second step.
Fair.
But anyways, we got some articles today, and typically we have one, but we have two. We have articles plural today. The first one we've had on our articles list for a little while. So, in this age of generative AI, it has aged a bit, but it's still only like 4 weeks old. So this is Tom Johnson's article, which is titled "AI is Accelerating Me." And I had to grab it this week. One, because I read it yesterday. And two, because it basically is the same stuff we were talking about on the Edo webinar. And I love that, like Tom goes through and he breaks down the value, but also some of the challenges that you get with these technologies. So he's got 4 parts in here, which I'll read off. I mean, everybody can just go and read the article. It's not that long. But he talks about how it's accelerating him. Like he gives some really good practical examples of where he's using AI technology to like do his work as a technical writer faster. He gets into how prompt engineering isn't an obvious skill. And this one for me is funny because I use this stuff, and even when I go into Edo, like I hesitate, and I'm like, wait a second, what would Casey do? How would he get this result? And I'm like trying to like run Casey on emulation to get the result I want inside of the technology. So it's not as natural for me. So when I read this, I was like, oh, it's totally true. It's not an obvious skill. And then he thinks that it's more appropriate for documentation than creative, which is interesting. And then there was one more observation at the end, but I think this is a really interesting and worthwhile article.
Yeah, the prompt engineering thing is really interesting to me because I feel like I have the opposite experience, which I guess kind of makes sense because a lot of the things that I wanted Edo to do, right, that I would have normally had to develop some type of prompt for specifically if I was using a general AI, we just built directly into Edo's training.
That's fair, and you know exactly what that is.
I do. I did most of it, but I think that's interesting because I wonder how prompt engineering is going to change over time when you have more purpose-built agents instead of using more generalized AI. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like right now most people are using kind of one generalized AI. But in the future, you're probably going to have special agents for various tasks so that you don't have to go and do the prompt engineering to get the general AI to get in the mindset to work on the problem that you're working on at that moment. And OpenAI is already doing this with some of their agent platform they can build. But I don't see that many people using it right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you're going to see more purpose-built AI systems. It just makes sense to specialize them, which we will use that as a good thread into our next article in just a second. I didn't do that on purpose, but that's why I'm kind of Tupperwaring it, and we'll come back to it. I want to read this one thing that came out of Tom's article, and this is an actual quote from it. So he spends this whole article talking about how AI is accelerating him and making his job faster, and how he claims he's gotten a 2x productivity out of using AI technologies, which is actually kind of pretty similar to what we saw with some of our power users in the Edo beta. So probably about right. But he says, interestingly, despite having access to powerful AI tools, I've been blogging less lately. I'm not sure entirely why. Partly, I've been incredibly busy at work. The documentation work in my group has been accelerating with more products and partners. And like, I read this and I was just like, oh my God, because this is so much the story where there's never a point where you can't do a better job for the customer. You can't do a better job describing the product. You can't do a better job, being more specific for a partner to enable them better. Like, there isn't a finite amount of work to do here. And the more systems get better to deliver them and enable us to do it, all it does is make the people who access these things, the knowledge curators and managers, that much more valuable. So I love that point, and I love that it kind of naturally and organically came out at the end of this article.
And that's really interesting related to the webinar that we did kind of around, helping writers get their nights and weekends back by, being more efficient, being able to get more stuff done, especially with, the bar is being raised. So even if your company isn't feeling that pressure right now, when your competitors start doing that and offering more personalized experience, more documentation, more robust experiences, that pressure is going to be there to raise the bar. So it's certainly interesting. Never ending amount of work and valuable work for these people to be doing.
Never ending amount of value to create. So, second article, because Ren's going to cut us off here in a minute. So let's get into this one. The second article was, this is actually a LinkedIn article. And it was why dev shouldn't write docs and how they can help anyways. And this is by a woman named Erin Grace. I'll put the link to this LinkedIn post in the description. It's a great article. And this one was yours, Casey. So I'm going to let you get into it, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
Yeah, so I really like this article because it didn't take the approach of saying that developers are not good writers or developers can't be good writers. And I think that was really important. The approach that it took to this is saying, kind of twofold. One is anytime you're splitting your time, you're going to have diminishing results in terms of the things that the efforts that you're putting in. And so like the top performers in any role or any industry, they try to focus on executing one thing really, really well. And when you're looking at developers writing code and also writing documentation, they can't do either of those things as well as they could if they were just doing one of them. And obviously we want developers fixing bugs and writing code and performing at the highest level on that task. And that reminded me of a question that always happens in my judo classes. So I run a judo academy in my spare time. And in judo, just like other martial arts, you can be a right-handed fighter, or you can be a left-handed fighter. And you can do the throws in judo on both sides. And so my students will at some point always ask me, should I be spending half my time working on my left side and half my time working on my right side? And I tell them that if they want to compete and they want to compete at a high level, they should just stick to working on one single time. Because if you split your time between both of them, then the person who works on the right side 100% of the time is going to be twice as good as you on their right side. And you're going to be just okay on both. And I feel like that's kind of a similar thing to what's happening when you have developers writing docs and doing both of those things.
I mean, there's the age-old question of the generalist versus the specialist, and then there's also context switching, right? Like even somebody who's very good at two things, if you make them do multiple things, they'll never be as good at. They'll never do both those things as well as efficiently. And the whole setup of having developers write the docs, which I run into pretty frequently as we talk to people who are thinking about their content operation systems, and I did this week actually. So almost not a week goes by that this hasn't come up. The thing that's interesting to me about that is like, should the developers also do the UX work? Should they do all the product research? Like they're the experts. Should they be, in this one, actually, Aaron cites in her article, should they be the support people? They are the experts in the product. Like, where is the line? Like, why is the line inclusive of docs in some circumstances, but like it's heresy or insanity to include those other things in there as well? Like, what is it about docs that makes people think that like it should be inside the line, but all those other things should be on the other side?
It's a super fascinating perspective. I think it probably comes back to the challenge of getting knowledge from developers and companies trying to shorten that as much as possible. Mm-hmm. But I also think that comes with another downside, which is perspective. And the developers are always going to have a very deep perspective on the product and the code and things like that. And I think one of the most important things that writers offer is being able to put themselves in multiple perspectives and having more of a clean slate than someone who's deeply embedded into the product. And that creates more robust documentation. It creates more clearer documentation. And it's not saying that developers can't do that, but that's a rarity in developers because they have too much knowledge. Makes them great reviewers, great subject matter experts, but probably not the people that you want writing the docs.
Yeah, that's the value in having another perspective come in to look at how these things are connected, I think is huge. And like, the best people who are, technical writers are communicators, right? And like communication is a really important skill. It's one of the skills that everybody says, all the AI people say you have to be mastering now because of AI. So the idea that like that skill in and of itself isn't something that should be really put into a role and then used to connect all the different pieces. Like, I don't get it. Like, I'll never fully understand it. Maybe if your documentation is only API docs and you're writing specifically for a pure developer audience or like internal docs or something like that, like maybe in that circumstance. But if you're trying to describe to somebody like how this system that they're coming in to work with or this thing they're unfamiliar with or how they're trying to learn it, like, being able to create education it's a skill. And like, it's not one that every developer has.
Yeah, I could see you being in a startup environment or having very resource constrained. But even then, we've seen the impact of good docs on customer experience and self-service. And there's a big argument there to really invest in it.
Yeah, I think if you've ever asked a developer about the product that they built, looking directly at you two, and tried to have them explain it to you in layman's terms, it's not usually a good result.
Well, some of us are far enough away from it now that we might be able to get that right.
I just think back to those first months at Heretto, and I was so overwhelmed. Cool. So I'm cutting you off officially, and we're going to do a couple of little hot topics, some hot takes on our hot topics. So first one is ChatGPT releasing 4.0 or 4. O or whatever it is. And surprisingly, their voice sounded a lot like Scarlett Johansson, but
Who?
apparently, um, so apparently they reached out to her, asked her if they could use her voice. She said no, and it still ended up sounding a lot like Scarlett Johansson, who has a very distinct voice.
So did you hear the other part of this that they claimed? So
Uh-huh.
they claimed that after she said no, they went and they found another actress that just happened to sound like her, and they licensed her voice.
I'm just
And
upset about this because I found out about this after they had removed the voice from GPT-4o, and I wanted to go hear it, and then I couldn't. And I was like, ah.
and
Like, that doesn't sound like Scarlett.
it's not the only thing that they left out of this release too. So there's a number of like analysis things that they showed in the pre-release, and there's a New York Times third article. There's a New York Times article, I don't know, yesterday or something, that went through a number of the things that they promised and didn't come out in the release. So I mean, release struggles for these companies, like I think they care more about the publicity. Like at the end of the day, it was probably good for them to piss off Scarlett Johansson and have it all over NPR and everywhere else, rather than having it go smoothly. So they're probably sitting back there being like, "Excellent."
No such thing as bad PR, right?
No bad press. Okay, so second hot topic. I'm actually going to call out Jared, who's not here this week. Last week, he would not let me bring this one up, but apparently, we are getting really close to being able to translate whales. So not all whales make the like classic like woo sounds. You know, some of them actually make more binary like clicks and things like that that are easier to translate. And so with AI, they're hoping to translate some whales. And so my question is, do you think who's going to be the first person to localize for whales?
Probably someone in a basement somewhere. I want to know who is going to be the first person to try to sell something to a whale once there's localized content for them.
Facebook, Meta.
What is it going to be?
What I want to know is what is the lang code for whale? And if you get that joke, you belong here.
WA already taken.
Oh. Okay, well, that was it for today. This was a really good one. Thank y'all very much for coming prepared and for giving me some of the things that I was not prepared for. So we will, as always, put this up on our podcast channels wherever you listen to those. We got another podcast coming out on Tuesday, second part with Jason Schwartz. So, give that a listen. We're still rocking and rolling with it. And otherwise, I hope everyone has